All right, welcome everybody. I'm Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet. This is Ken Weeb from Sportsnet, and this is our weekly long form podcast we love doing where we get to catch up with some of the big rainmakers in the industry and kind of get the story behind the storyteller is the line that we like using here and what we're trying to do, our mission statement with this thing. But first off, Ken, how are you doing today?
I'm excellent, Sean. How about yourself? It's a beautiful
I'm
day.
doing good. It's a gorgeous day. You got out for your first golf game, and everyone knows a little bit about Ken and his golfing past. How'd your first round go?
Fun day for sure. Made a few pars, but that was only there to offset some of the three putts. But always good to be out. Folks will be shocked to learn that you were out before I was, but we'll look forward to getting out at the same time. That's for sure.
You know what I found out, Ken, went out for my first round of the year, and I found out that, after the off season and everything, the time away from it, I'm still a really bad golfer after all this time. It's
still need practice, still need lessons. Good things to learn early on. What I learned is that don't roll up to the course and go trunk to tee because you need a few swings after all that rust was there to be shaken off. Two putts on the practice green was not enough apparently. I know better, but this is a classic, like you said. You always know better, but then you forget. Get there an hour before, 30 minutes, whatever it takes. Go through your practice routine, and then you might have a chance to do some scoring. But always great to be out, and a couple of nice hits, and a few folks will know there were a couple of BAM drives out there, so that was encouraging.
I find golf is such a game of instincts, you know what I mean? And that my instincts for the game are wrong. Like, so ever since I grew up in Pinawa, Manitoba, and they've got a phenomenal course there. So it was this interesting life growing up because all the kids, all your friends, you had access to this, one of the most gorgeous courses in Manitoba, and you'd play it all the time. I was a pretty good golfer when I was young. Like I remember it was a 9-hole course when I was growing up. It hadn't yet become an 18-hole course, excuse me. And I remember I could get in the low 40s. It wasn't that bad for a younger kid, teenager. And but somewhere along the line, I picked up this terrible, terrible slice, and I'd had it for like 15 years. We've had Derek Ingram, who, people who don't know who he is, he's Canada's top PGA coach. He lives right here in Winnipeg. Corey Connor's coach, so he would have been down at the Masters. We actually talked to him when he was down at the Masters. You've gone to him for some help. I went to him for some help, and I remember the year before I had gone to him. My best round of the year had been like 90 or something like that. I was around that 90. Maybe I broke and had 89 or something like that. But this one game, I'd gone into the bush and punched out 12 times off the tee because everything I hit was a slice. Playing the slice, it would start going towards those trees and end up in those trees. But I'd punched out 12 times, and I was thinking to myself, if I could ever just figure this slice out, my game, I could be challenging for, low 80s, maybe 70s. And so I went to DI with this terrible slice and thought he's going to try something. It's not going to work because I'd gone to a bunch of people before that. Nothing helped. And he cleared that thing up in like a half hour. Now, I'm not saying that it's entirely gone. I'll still hit a slice here and there, but I'm actually at this stage more likely to draw than I am to slice the ball. But the thing that blows me away is I go out on the course now, and the one thing that I've figured out, just everything else has gone wrong. Like I hit like mid 90s. When I practice a lot, I'll get a better game and I can sneak down into the high 80s. But I am what I am as a golfer. No matter what I fix, something else breaks down. I just find the game and it comes back to the instincts of it. I'm just a guy who gets out and tries to grip it and rip it. I can't stay away from it. Like when I go to, my uncle would always take me out and he'd be like, take a nice soft swing. And I would like throw it as hard as I could. He'd be like, softer. And I'd throw it as hard as I could. Like there's no in between with me. And I guess, in a sport where you need touch, that's not a good thing. It's a bad instinct to have. Are there specific instincts you've had to fight?
Oh, for sure. Mental game, for sure. I mean, I had to be mentally strong in every sport that I played, and I find that I don't trust my instincts enough. Or there's a lot of times where that voice on your shoulder, better. You got to listen to your caddy and, sort of minimize the damage. Damage Control is a book that you should read, Sean. It's a good book. That it helped my game on that front. But eliminate one side of the fairway, keep the ball in play, and limit it to the 3 putts. It's the easiest path to getting you from the 90s to the 80s.
It's just so much easier to just go and swing away than have to think about it as deep as you do. I don't want to think when I'm out golfing. I want to get out there and just let fly. But obviously, the frustration is getting to me, so I should probably dig in a little bit deeper. We got a great show coming up for you today. We're going to talk to Christine Simpson in about 5 minutes here, and we've got Ron MacLean coming on after that. Two just absolute titans of the industry. It's extremely excited to talk about. And it's a good thing we're getting this in with Ron before things get crazy here, because the playoffs come around and his job gets really, really busy at that point. So a week left in the season before he gets to this. Just a quick thought, Ken, on what the Jets need to do down this last 5-game stretch. Are we at 5 or 4 games? Four games. Four games left. What you need to see from them before we head into the playoffs here.
Yeah, I mean, it was big for the psychological element for the Jets to snap that 7-game skid. We've talked a lot about the struggles of late, but they've started to clean up some of the mess in the 5-on-5 play. Obviously, only allowing 3 goals in the last 4 games. We saw their power play strike once the other night after a 1-for-20 drought, and I think some people forget that 1-for-20 included an empty netter again that Leafs game, right? I mean, Hyman was in the box, so yeah, you can call that a power play goal, but there wasn't even a goaltender in the net. So their structure looked a little bit better the last couple of days for sure, and their penalty kill had been a bit of a struggle when Adam Lowry was out, but it's improved as well. So I think the most important thing that they saw out of that game against Calgary, even though he was not overworked, there were a bunch of subtle saves for Connor Hellebuck that suggested he was much more dialed in after that break. And him saying that he got back to having fun in the net, I think was something that was interesting for sure. The Jets, again, that was one step. They need to continue to sort of build. It's looking more and more like it's going to be a Jets-Oilers-Smythe division reunion, which I say come on in with open arms, welcoming that with open arms. I think it'll be fantastic. Yes, I understand there are a lot of nightmares for folks in the 80s who are Jets fans, but I think it's a great opportunity to renew a great old rivalry, and I think it should be a fantastic series.
All right. Well, we're going to get right into our show here, because one of my complaints about this show, Ken, is we always are left wanting more time with our guests. Yeah. But some of them do a good job of showing up early, and Chris Simpson is right here waiting for us. Add her into the show. So happy to have you on the show. I'm glad we could make this work, because I know Fridays can be really busy for you. But Chris, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's lovely to be able to be a part of your show this morning. Thanks for the invite.
Well, you know what? I owe you so much. I'm going to start off with this quick story here. When I first got hired by Sportsnet, and you go from being like a local news person to a national news person, it's a whole new crew of people that you have to try and impress, and figure your way through it and make contacts. And I always go back to this, and you'll remember this. You did a series that I was working on in Nashville between the Nashville Predators and the Anaheim Ducks. And there was one night that, we kind of got chatting with each other, and you were really kind to me, and that was nice. So we were staying at the same hotel, and the series had just wrapped, and I was heading out onto the strip, right? And I saw you, and I said, Chris, you want to come join me? I'm going to go meet up with some people. And I was just thinking, you're going to be like, well, thanks, new guy, but I'm going to be staying here. And you were like, yeah, okay, let's go. So you and me hopped down, and we went down to Tootsie's, and we met up with Michael Tracos and Speck and a bunch of guys like that. And right off the bat, I had their respect, because I brought Christine Simpson to the party. So thank you for allowing me my entry into my entry moment into national sports. Thank you for that.
Well, I mean, if a night at Tootsie's in Nashville doesn't cement a good friendship, I don't know what does. Yeah, that was so fun, wasn't it? And I, for one, am looking forward to being able to do things like that again, hopefully real soon.
I think every sports journalist wants the Nashville Predators to be a successful team, so that there are trips down to Nashville to cover them.
Agreed.
Chris, one of the things we love to do is a deep dive on our guests and kind of get, the story behind the storytellers. So we dig into your past, and we talk to people and we talk to sources. And I was told by one of my sources that I was supposed to ask you about the Miss Teen London pageant.
Oh, geez.
And what winning the Miss Teen London pageant has done for you. What did you take from that? What did the competition angle of that? How did that shape you as the broadcaster you are today?
Gee, thanks so much for that, Sean. Really appreciate that. That is so funny. So yeah, 1982, if you can believe it, in London, Ontario. It was funny because I worked for a modeling agency, like in London, Ontario, so you would do like fashion shows in malls and the odd thing that would get into the London Free Press. And my agency had submitted my name. Like, I didn't want anything to do with it, but they kind of like, yeah, no, this is your last year of eligibility, you should go in. So I didn't tell anybody I was even involved in the pageant, including my brother, Dave, who was captain of the London Knights at the time. So I end up winning the thing. And the reporters at the Knights game start asking my brother about, oh, what, you must be so happy for your sister. She was just crowned Miss Teen London tonight. And he thought they were joking. He's like, what are you talking about? So anyway, it was one of those crazy things. But I would just say in general that modeling certainly just helped with, getting used to standing up in front of people and having them watch you, like everything you do along the way, I think helps you get to where you are. So in a weird way, I guess, other than the embarrassment that it still can provide decades later, it helped me be able to handle everything like that question.
Yes.
Handled like a champion. I'm told that winning that pageant was the gift that kept giving, because one of the things you got from that was a record a month back in those days.
Yeah.
So what was your favorite record, and describe, because I'm told it was excitement in the household when the record arrived every month. Is there one that stands out to you?
I'm figuring out who you must have been talking to. It was, believe it or not, it was actually a record a week for a year. So each month I would be able to go down to the radio station that sponsored the pageant, and I'd be able to pick out 4 albums. And I mean, we are talking Spandau Ballet, Thompson Twins, now Bryan Adams, I do remember that too, but like it was definitely, this is early 80s. So God, it would be tough to pick out one in particular. Well, Bryan Adams, I think I would have to say, but it was very much 80s music. And yes, so my love of 80s music continues today, I guess, because of the rather large record collection that I got in 1982.
Fantastic.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
Chris, how about you talked about, getting comfortable in public. Where did the passion for, or the interest in journalism begin, and what kind of road did you take?
Yeah, well, certainly not the conventional road. And because I've said it before, I mean, as much as hockey was obviously a huge part of my upbringing, being in my family and the middle sister between 2 hockey playing brothers, and younger brother Craig and older brother Dave, who was drafted by the Islanders back in 1980. So we as a family, I mean, I was at the local rink all the time. We watched Hockey Night in Canada every Saturday night. So I loved hockey. But 2 things that I didn't think were options for me: I didn't play hockey, because when I was growing up, there really weren't many girls that played hockey. I played all kinds of sports, but not hockey. And I certainly never thought, I'm going to be on Hockey Night in Canada someday, because there were no women on Hockey Night in Canada. It just didn't seem like it was something that was even a path. So, my path then went more the way of marketing and PR, which landed me eventually, after lots of different jobs, as marketing manager at the Hockey Hall of Fame. And so then for the first time, a love of hockey and my, background in marketing kind of were combined. And it was really through my time at the Hall that I first started getting opportunities to be on camera, partly just because we'd have crews come from all over the world to do stories on the Hall of Fame, particularly when it opened at Young and Front in 93. And I'd often have, television crews say, because I would give them a walking tour of the Hall, and I'd be talking about the history of the game. And, I'd have producers go, wow, you really know a lot about hockey, and you seem comfortable in front of the camera. Have you thought of doing this for a living? And I would laugh at them like, no, I didn't go to broadcast journalism school. That wouldn't be anything. Then the Leafs hired me at the same time to be their first in-arena host. And every team has one now where they do contests and, things in game. So that got me comfortable, again, being in front of a crowd with a microphone in my hand. And I literally started getting opportunities in television, but still working at the Hockey Hall of Fame. And honestly, if Sportsnet wasn't a brand new network starting up in 1998, I don't think I'd be in this business, because I really didn't have any business in getting a job in national, sports broadcasting, because I didn't have the conventional background that one should have. But what I did know was hockey. What I did know was almost everyone in the game of hockey, either through obviously a lot of players that I played with my brother, but also my job at the Hockey Hall of Fame and my job with the Leafs. Gary Bettman got his first tour of the Hall of Fame his second week on the job in 1993. So I've known him for that long. So I remember cobbling together my VHS tape and sending it into Scott Moore, and he saw something that probably I didn't even see, and gave me a chance. And I'm very grateful that he did.
Chris, you talked about, Scott Moore seeing something that you felt you didn't see. You talked about giving these tours and, impressing the people who were suggesting you should get into broadcast. Your brother gets into broadcast after a great hockey playing career. Is there something at the root of it that you see that maybe came from your parents or came from your upbringing or your family that kind of put you and your brother in a position to be able to come and be so good in this industry?
Well, you know what? I guess I would just say in our family, it was always understood you can be whatever you want to be. Like even the fact that the boys ended up both in professional hockey, it wasn't like there was no discussions around the dinner table like, okay, if you're going to play hockey, you have to make it to the NHL. That's the be all, end all, and that's where you should. It was more, hey, if you like it, give it a try, see how it goes. And if you don't, at least you gave it a try. So I remember having a conversation with my dad once, because as I said, I had normal jobs up until, 1998, when it wasn't just Sportsnet taking a chance on me. It was kind of me taking a chance on me, like leaving normal kind of 9-to-5 jobs to take on this opportunity. And I remember my dad saying, you need to know whether you're ready to work without a net. So you have to be ready to fail when you take an opportunity like that, where a lot of people might go, geez, what would make you think you could do that? So obviously, I guess they instilled enough confidence in myself that, yeah, you know what? I think I can give this a try, but still to be, I guess, fearless in a way, to give something a try, knowing full well that you could fail. And if you fail, you're doing it on national television, sometimes live. But yeah, I'm glad I did. I'm certainly glad my brother did. And I don't think either one of us have looked back.
We know that you had two brothers involved in hockey, but what kind of sports were you into, Chris, and what impact did they have? I mean, we know we work in an industry where there is an individual component, but that overall team component is so valuable too when it comes to anything from broadcast to networking and contacts and all of those things.
Yeah, I'd say my big sport was volleyball, and I played volleyball up until university, just like from a house league standpoint, not varsity, but I loved playing volleyball. I played baseball as a young girl. I was on the track team. I was a cheerleader, of course. So I kind of did every sport other than hockey, even though I certainly skated. We always had the backyard rink, or Oak Ridge Arena in London. We always would go there. But I guess what I learned, teamwork, right? And the fact that it was always sort of team sports, and that you were there to support each other, and that everyone had a role. And if you didn't play your role, no matter how big or small it was, the team wasn't going to have success. So I think, as a lot of people would say, teamwork, whether it is in sports or broadcasting or whatever your office environment is, you learn that you do need to lean on other people and let those other people know that you're there to support them too, because it will only make you as a team better.
Based on your family, I don't think there's any surprise that you ended up in sports. I'm going to list some stuff off. Tell me if I'm getting any of this wrong. Your mom was, you said you were a cheerleader. Your mom was a cheerleader, an Olympic sprinter. Is that right? So
this is funny. So she was a sprinter, and the neat story is the Olympic trials, it was for the 52 Helsinki Olympics. The Olympic trials that year, the Canadian Olympic trials, were being held in Hamilton. And so her older brother, because she was winning all of the, races in London, But her brother kind of forced her to go to Hamilton for the trials, but no one really knew who she was. Like, who's this kid from? She was 16. No one knew who she was. So she used cleats for the first time, starting blocks for the first time. She runs her heat. She ends up qualifying for the Canadian Olympic team. Well, the Canadian Olympic team are kind of caught with, like, who is this? We didn't plan for this. We didn't get her a visa. So they scramble. I still have all of the press clippings from the London Free Press. The Canadian Olympic Association came out and said, she's too young to go to the Olympics. So she doesn't qualify. Even though she qualified, she didn't get to go because at 16, they said she was too young, which there was no real, rule or age limit. And she was like, oh, I don't need to go to Helsinki. I just had a blast at the Olympic trials, but there was quite the, it caused a bit of a controversy at that time. So she didn't end up going to the Olympics, but she did qualify.
So that you've got that side of athletics. Your dad was a football player at Western University. We know your older brother still has the best single season in London Knights history. Your younger brother's second overall draft pick. Mm-hmm. Your sister wasn't into athletics. I'm told she was, I don't know if bookish is the word, but studious, liked to read a lot. I'm interested. We know the effect that everyone else in your family had on you. I wonder how she shaped you.
Yeah, very much so. And the nice thing about our sister, who just passed away last year, she was the one who, like, sports didn't mean anything to her. And that was a good thing. So, as we would sometimes get, you could kind of get cocky or high and mighty, she'd be like, yeah, no, good. She was always proud of us. But like, sports weren't the be all end all. She kind of kept us in line with, just because a lot of people think hockey is the greatest thing. I mean, it was a deal that was struck with the family. The boys were forced to go to one of her concerts each year. She was very involved in choir and music. And she was forced to go to one of their hockey games each year. Like, that's only fair, right? So she would show up to a London Knights game or a Junior B London Diamonds game. She would bring her book. She would sit there and kind of read her book and kind of watch the game. But you know what I learned from her? My love of classical music, my love of travel, my love of museums. The one thing I do if I'm not going to Tootsie's, if I'm in Nashville, ask anybody who knows me, when I am on the road, the one thing I will always do if I have a few hours of time, I will go to whatever museum or art gallery is in that city. I will hunt it down. And so I have been to incredible museums and art galleries throughout the National Hockey League cities. And I have my sister to thank, because she was the one that just opened my mind and opened my heart to things outside of, the sports world that can be very testosterone filled and very, we're the biggest thing ever. And it's like, no, there's a whole world out there that is worth exploring as well.
Oh, that is just tremendous. Chris, where does your love for the art of the interview come from? And what are the, maybe for a young journalist who may be watching, what makes a good interview?
That's a really good question. I mean, where the love came from it, I guess I'm just a curious person, like whether there happens to be a camera rolling or not. I just really enjoy talking to people and hearing more about them. And I guess I would say the thing that I learned probably the most, that it took a little while to understand, all of us who do interviews, you kind of have your idea of what your questions are going to be. You might have them written down, you might have them in your head. The most important thing I can say is listen to the answers that your interview subject gives, because early on, sometimes you're so worried about, okay, and I'm sorry, what was my next? So my next question is going to be this. And I would look back at an interview and I would have been, okay, I had 10 questions and I nailed them all. But then when you really listen to what the answer was, sometimes it takes you in a completely different direction that you never thought that you would go in. And you only know that if you listen to what that person is saying. So it's easy to forget that side of it, especially if you're a little nervous, if you're starting out, but just try and embrace the moment and try and, put the person that you're speaking to at ease, because that's where you're going to get the best conversation, is if you both are just sitting, having a conversation, forgetting that there are lights and cameras and other people around you, and you're just talking back and forth. And to me, that's where some of the best stories come out.
Chris, you talked about coming to sports and broadcast a little bit later in life after, doing your 9 to 5. But before you got there, your brother was part of one of the greatest sports dynasties in history, in all of sports. And you got kind of a front seat to that because the way that team approached things, family was really important and part of it. I wondered, and I mean, maybe we can get in later. I don't know if there's any stories you want to share from that time, a best story or something like that. But what really interests me is you having an inside track to that world, to that team, and seeing maybe one of the greatest hockey teams of all time from the inside, and then going and covering sports from the outside, how that inside look into that Oilers dynasty kind of shaped the way you saw sports and you covered sports.
Yeah, you know what? I do consider myself so lucky that my brother happened to be a part of that team at such a pivotal time, too. I mean, he was traded from Pittsburgh to Edmonton late in 1987. So, of course, the 1988 Stanley Cup was his first, and it would be Wayne's last. The team sort of then started to change after that. But it's so true. It was a family. It really was. And not only meaning the guys were so close, almost like brothers, but families were invited to be a part of everything. I can remember after games, when I'd go out to visit Craig, after games, we'd go out for dinner, and it wouldn't just be with Mark Messier. It was with Mark, his mom and dad, his sister Mary Kay, his brother Paul, if he was back from, having played in Europe, Steve Smith. I know Steve Smith's dad from having, been there. Kevin Lowe's mom used to come. And so it wasn't like, oh, we're infringing upon this sports team. It's that, no, this sports team is a real family. So to be able to have celebrated a Stanley Cup, not only with the team, and for Craig, it ended up being 2, but that 88 one was so special. To have really experienced that as a family member, was something that was so special. And I never forget what that feeling was like when I've then gone on to cover Stanley Cup final games and been in the dressing room when the champagne is flying and mom, dad, sister, brother are in there enjoying the experience with their family member. I know exactly what that feels like and the joy that is there as much for the family as it is for the player. And you never lose sight of that because they don't do it alone and they don't celebrate alone. It takes a lot for those guys to get to that moment. And so I think as a broadcaster, that has helped me so much because I get it. I understand what that feels like.
Yeah, and then what's it like to be able to share that story in that, through that lens, because you have that special background that most people in our industry you just simply don't have.
Yeah, I think it might be a little helpful as people do say, how do you get these guys sometimes to be so relaxed and comfortable talking to you? And I don't know, you'd have to ask them, but I wonder if part of it is that I know what their lives, I mean, not them specifically, but I understand what it's like. And I understand sort of what a game day is like for a player. And obviously other former players who are in the broadcasting industry, they know that too. I just know it from a different perspective, but I think I still, just sort of have that understanding of what it's like for them.
Chris, there's so much I want to get to with you, but one thing I want to make sure that we get to is your new project, The Big Picture. I think that one really resonated with Winnipeggers right off the bat because that interview you had with John Tortorella and involving Pierre-Luc Dubois in that situation. It was kind of like the Bible of like, okay, this is what we need to know as this player comes to Winnipeg. Why that project? What do you love about it?
Well, that project, first and foremost, because, and as you know, Sportsnet's been very great with all of us this year, saying to anybody, we're not going to make you do something you're not comfortable doing. So normally I've always done features, but I've also been ringside reporter on the road every week doing games. And I just said, I'm not comfortable, I don't think yet, getting on planes, traveling to do games. So I knew that I wasn't going to be doing games other than the odd one here in Toronto. So then it's like, okay, well, my focus will be on features, which is great. I love doing them, but I'm not getting on planes to do interviews with people either. And we all know that Zoom is sort of the only way that we could do it now. And luckily, 2 of our producers in the features department, Jeremy McElhaney and Michael Addick, came to me, and they were the ones that pitched, like, we know you want to do features, but there's this screening room. There's this little theater in the CBC Broadcast Center. And literally, guys, it is on the same floor as our office. I've walked by this closed door, I don't know how many times over the last 7 years. I had no idea that that theater was there. And so they said, you know what? We can do Zoom interviews from in here. At least we can make it look a little bigger and not just like, little laptops. And so they were the ones that pitched the idea to me. And I said, I love it. Anything that can keep me, being able to talk with people in the industry, not only players, but coaches, GMs, and tell their stories. I'm all in. So the big picture was born, and having Tortorella to kick it off was not a bad way. It did make some waves, as John Tortorella always does, but I have loved it so much and look forward to doing some more throughout the playoffs.
Keeping things fresh in our industry can sometimes be a challenge. What's it like when you get a new project, and what does that do to, in terms of showing off that versatility? Yeah,
and I think too, you guys would probably say the same. Not only this time in our industry where a lot of things are changing, but the pandemic is forcing people to change things like your show. I mean, to me, there are always reasons to try something new. I think now a lot of those reasons have been a little more forced upon us. So there's always, I've been doing this now for decades, but never something quite like this. But I go back to Dad's advice. You got to be ready to learn to, work without a net, and you hope it works. And if it doesn't, you go back to the drawing board and you try something new. So I'm excited as to what other opportunities there may be out there, as well as we all navigate what this world is like, and also what fans want to see. And I will still always say that I think fans do like to hear the story behind the story, or hear something from a player more than just how our power play is going and, why we're on a 5-game winning streak. Sometimes, to me, my most favorite interviews were actually not even talking about hockey. We're talking about the player.
Chris, if we have time, and we're probably not going to, I want to get into your friendship with Charles Barkley, which I just think is so cool. But I want to get into this. I think it's a lot more important. We worked on a series together. I was doing news, you were doing the broadcast. That series between the Ottawa Senators and the Boston Bruins. Christina Rutherford was working that series. She was a writer on that series, and Jets fans will know Christina Rutherford. She comes into town and gets great stuff every time she comes in. She always goes into the room and tells me something I don't know about the team that I covered. She's phenomenal. Mm-hmm. And it was really interesting because Christine's a good friend of mine, and we all kind of hung out together. And it was just really evident to me, how she looked up to you and what you've done through your career, and kind of how you're a trailblazer for women in the industry. And I know that you're very vocal when it comes to that, and women in sports and carving out a role. You talked about it when you started out. You didn't see women like you on Hockey Night in Canada. What's it been like to carve your way through the industry, and how seriously do you take your role as a role model for women in the industry? Well,
thank you for giving the opportunity to talk about it, because when you start and you do realize, you're, if not the only one of few women that are doing this, I didn't really think about it much. You're putting your head down and you're doing your job, right? And it's only been really in the last number of years where I've, first of all, just been so happy in seeing other women in the industry in front of the camera, or as writers, or behind the camera in production. And then to have more and more women even reaching out and saying, and I do all the time, but be it students or, young women who have grown up watching people like me and saying, hey, I just, could I pick your brain? I think I want to do what you do, but I'd like to hear more about how you did it. I take that role very seriously. I'm always happy to talk to women who think that they want to follow in my footsteps. And if it gave them even the idea that this was an industry that they could be a part of, then I am grateful for that. So I'm very happy in how far we've gone since I first came into the industry in 1998. I still think we have a long way to go. And so I will still keep pushing. And that sometimes means pushing our management at Sportsnet to open their eyes and open their minds to not just always having the same type of people in each job. And I think I can say, and you'll agree, I feel very fortunate that we are a company that is open to that, even if sometimes they need to be reminded or need to, have a spotlight shone on something that maybe isn't where it should be, that they listen. And women in the industry is certainly one area of that I will continue to be a part of, as will my colleagues, in Tara Sloan and Kathy Campbell-Pascal and Jen Botterill. Oh my God, I'm so thrilled with Jen and the job she's doing this year. I'm so grateful that she is a part of our team, because she is just killing it.
Yeah, we had her on an earlier show, and I agree. She's been absolutely killing it at the desk on Hockey Night in Canada. She absolutely killed it on our show, as did you, Chris. We're so happy to catch up with you. You're always so kind and generous with your time, and I'm not talking about just this show. I'm talking about at all stages. Every time I've dealt with you or worked with you, you've always made me feel like I belong right from the very beginning. And I'll tell you, having grown up watching you and admiring you, it's hard to feel like you belong with Chris Simpson, because I think so highly of you. So thank you so much for joining us here today. It really means a lot.
Well, Sean and Ken, thank you for the invitation. And after that, Sean, I really owe you a beer at Tootsie's the next time we're in Nashville after all of that. Thank you.
I cannot wait.
That was awesome. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.
Chris. Thanks, guys.
All right, from one titan of the industry to the other, two guests who are right on time today. Let's bring in Ron MacLean. So unbelievably happy to have you on the show. How are you doing today, Ron? Oh, we got some audio issues here, Ron. Can you hear us?
How's that?
There we go.
Sorry, Ken. Sorry, Sean. That's I was doing voiceover work for a charity. Adam Graves is involved in, the New York Rangers. So poor Adam, he needs and it's called Smile Zone. He could use one. Just had my
so happy to have you on here. We try to do, and I've said it a couple times in the show here, I've been saying it for a while, this show is about kind of getting the story behind the storytellers. So we like to try and do deep dives on people. I'd asked Christine earlier on in the show about winning Miss Teen London, which she just absolutely shook her fist at me for bringing up. But
she's going to get you. She's going to get you for that.
That's what she said. You were a hard guy to research because I mean, I think you've been around and been guiding people through hockey for so long and through sports, and it's hard to kind of get into stuff that people don't know about you. So I got to go to places that I think people don't know. I've looked into sources, and I'm told by a very good source that you're a terrible dancer. And that one night in Malaysia, you were looked upon like a second-class citizen. That's what I was told. Looked upon as a second-class citizen because of your dancing. Tell me that story, and are you really that bad of a dancer, or does my source have it off?
No, your source is really unreliable. Shirley Najak is his name, producer at Hockey Night in Canada.
He told me not to bring up his name. He said I could say that. You wouldn't know it was him, but yeah.
Yeah, of course I know it's him. He had such joy, because I asked a girl today, what the backstory is. We were having a soiree in KL, Kuala Lumpur, and we had Howard Bagley was our audio engineer, was a genius with audio, and he was a great guitar player, and he was playing Brian. He got up on stage, kind of like karaoke before karaoke. This is 1998. And he was playing Bryan Adams, Summer of 69. And we were all in such a mood. And I asked a local woman to dance. And I was rebuffed. And Shirley explained to me, Ron, that's not in the culture. You don't go and ask a woman in a Ismaili Muslim, table to dance with you. It just isn't done. And that he thought that was the greatest thing. So yeah, I've certainly been rebuffed on occasion, but it's not because I'm not Travolta. I am. But look at my shirt. Actually, I'm gonna my shirt up a little bit here. I'm back in my Saturday Night Fever days. It's funny. I just wished a buddy a happy birthday in Red Deer. He's a May 7th, and he was great for playing Dust in the Wind, Kansas. He could play that acoustically or on the piano. And when I go back and watch live performances of the rock band Kansas, they're all dressed like we did in the 70s, and it's priceless. And actually, here's a story that not many people would know. I was in Medicine Hat at provincials in basketball when I got the call from CKRD radio to go full time. So I was just coming to the end of my grade 12 year, and I'd never played basketball. I joined after I got cut by the Red Deer Rustler junior hockey team, and thought, oh, well, I'll play basketball. I'm lousy at hockey. So our team, lo and behold, wins the region, and we're off into the provincials at Medicine Hat, Alberta. And that's when Kansas's album, Point of No Return, is on the charts. And I get this call from CKRD radio, and I'm thinking, well, hell, I was going to U of A in the fall to be a teacher. What do I do? And we didn't do very well at the basketball, but listening to that album, Point of No Return by Kansas, is kind of a seminal memory of deciding, okay, I'll try radio for a bit. And then if that doesn't pan out, I'll go to teaching.
Love the adjustment on the fly. It's so great that Kansas occasionally plays the intermissions at Predators games now. I guess that must bring back some crazy memories, Ron.
And when we go down, it's Poncho and Lefties, the bar, not Tootsie's. That's just to be clear. I don't care if Chris buys, but when we get to Nashville, we're going to a little funny one around the corner called Poncho and Lefties, because that's another favorite of mine by Merle Haggard and Townes Van Zandt. You know who Townes Van Zandt is? You ever hear of him? Yeah. So Townes is a Texas troubadour, died at 52, raging alcoholic, sad, but a brilliant artist. And he actually attended Shattuck St. Mary's as a football player. He was a great athlete, so the same school as Jonathan Taves, this guy that could sing. And it's a Willie Nelson and Merle Haggard who made it famous, but it's a Townes Van Zandt song.
We were talking with Chris. Oh, sorry, Sean. I was just going to ask you.
I was going to say my dad was a really big Steve Earle fan, so I grew up with Steve Earle. Yeah. Townes Van Zandt was a hero of his, so it affected so much in the music industry. Yeah, go on, Ken.
We're talking with Chris about the art of the interview, Ron. We know that you love interviews. What makes a good one, and who are maybe some of your influences when it came to the style that you use and how that evolved over the years?
That's a good, Ken, it's funny. I don't consider myself a very good interviewer, to be honest. I've had, where I'm well armed to do, say, a Gary Bettman, which becomes a bit adversarial because I take the side of the PA and he's obviously owner side. And some of those have been, deep dives into labor negotiations, and I appreciated doing them. It wasn't popular for me to be doing them. The networks were upset that I was a lousy partner, and certainly the league was upset that I was challenging Gary. I do love, that kind of an interview, the legal interview, where there's some issue at stake. And role models would have to be, back in the day, I really admired Dave Hodge. He was always... I remember Dave teaching me kind of at the get-go not to be too chummy with the guest before the interview. Everything had to be a surprise. And that wasn't in me. I'm kind of a Red Deer, Alberta, jovial kid, only child who needed friends, needed brothers and sisters because I didn't have any. So I wasn't cut from that cloth that I could be standoffish and wait for the moment to zing and get the true authentic reaction. But it was great advice, and I do recommend it for interviewers. I watched, Peter Zosky operate, and I was impressed. I love Johnny Carson. I made it a point to get home every night after my radio shift in Red Deer to see Johnny Carson operate The Tonight Show. And it was not just the repartee or kibitzing with his sidekick, Ed McMahon, but it was also how he let the guest. I'll tell you a story. Robin Williams was one of his regulars, and another was Steve Martin. So Steve Martin was doing the circuit. He was going to be on the Merv Griffin show, the Mike Douglas show, the Johnny Carson show, and I apologize to the younger listener. These were all talk shows back in the 70s. And Steve Martin prepared a little shtick to do when he went on all these shows. And the shtick was he had bought a Greyhound bus, and he was going to soup it up and make it a sports car. He was going to put a fancy dog on the side of the bus. And he thought to himself, and this is probably politically incorrect, but he thought, I can pull up to a woman on the curb and I can open the door and I can say, hey, you want to get in the back seat? Which was a line in the 70s. You want to get in the back seat? And my chances are 43-1 with a Greyhound bus. So that's the little shtick that Steve Martin creates. And he said, the only guy that let me get the story started and finished so that the punchline had the proper spacing was Johnny Carson. The other guys both butted in halfway through the shtick and ruined it. So I watched Carson religiously to see how he operated.
I will make sure we do not butt in on you. Top end of that, you were talking about your adversarial interviews with Bettman. I think there was a feeling, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when George Stroumboulopoulos took the chair on the big show and you got moved to Hometown Hockey, I think there was a feeling that had something to do with that. I've always been interested in getting the story from you, just the feelings that you went through when you lost, the captain's chair on the Hockey Night in Canada broadcast, but also because I know that the hometown hockey, the opportunity that was created with that is something that you absolutely adore. So I want to know what maybe you felt at that time you had lost and what you had found.
Sean, honestly, I didn't feel I'd lost a thing. And I don't mean that to be grandiose about it. I don't blame Bettman. I don't blame Scott Moore. I don't blame anybody for saying, this guy's too adversarial in his relationship with the league. He's got to go. I think it was a time when Rogers stepped in with their $5 billion deal, and they were trying to go towards distribution television versus appointment television. You were going to be able to see your Jets in Ottawa on one channel, your Montreal, Toronto on another, and they needed to get younger, hipper. They needed to really push. That was their strength, where you could see the games, and the old sort of locked-in system needed a shakeup. So I was part of that, and I was okay with it. I was 54 years old. I had done the show since I was 26. I'd had a good run, so I didn't. And then, as you say, the opportunity to do hometown hockey felt like pennies from heaven. That was going to be, as Christine and you were just discussing, Tara Sloan could have a key role, and Jen Botterill in our rookie year. We could have a woman in a prominent place, just as Sarah Orlesky gets on the Jets broadcast with you, Ken. It was very important. Everything was sort of, I felt, happening in the right way on the continuum. I'm 54. It's nice to have someone else take the chair, if you want to call it take the chair, host. Let's just say it sounds too like I'm making it something bigger than it is. So yeah, it was no problem at all. It wasn't. I'm sure Gary Bettman was happy to have George interview him and not me. But honestly, the whole horse left the barn in 2006. The true argument was always about salary cap or no salary cap. It was about proper, a union in the NHL or sports league has to fight for the player's right, which is what is the next best offer for their services. They should be paid about that. Simple as that. And that they have been deprived of that. They're capped 4 ways ever since 2006. And there's not much for me to argue with Gary about anymore.
Just a quick one, Ron, just because you know him. I was so fortunate at the University of Regina. Roy Bonesteel, the late Roy Bonesteel, man alive, was around our program. So he certainly influenced my interviewing techniques and style, as did Jill Spelsey, a longtime CBC person as well. But what's it been like for you to see the evolution of the industry, and where do you think it's going?
Well, the obvious thing that we're all kind of coping with is the ethics of our technology. Where are they? We're with TikTok and social media. I guess I'll just not name them all. I think Silicon Valley experienced this whole surge ahead of us, and I think they've kind of come out on the other end. I might be mistaken on this, but I think they've kind of turned away from this obsession. But we're in the midst of it right now, and it's a huge element to what we're doing. The two frontiers that are really curious to a guy at my age: gambling in sport. When you see what happened this week in New York, when you see somebody lash out at George Peros, it's no different than Tim Peel having a private conversation about, I'm going to get one on this team. It can't be done. And the reason it can't be done is gambling. So this is the new revenue stream. These are the new pennies from heaven for the leagues and the owners. And that's a really, really interesting one for me to sort of try to get mentally around. And social media. Those are the two, Ken, that I sort of look at and think, does that take from us, the art of the conversation? Because the conversation ultimately, certain things are timeless. Cervantes with Don Quixote, Shakespeare with anything he ever wrote, was always the wisdom was revealed in conversation. And that's hard to do in 140 characters.
Excuse me. You're quoting books, Ron. When we get on these meetings together for Rogers, I look in the back and I see all those books, and I look at my bookshelf and I feel a little embarrassed, to be honest. I'm told you're a voracious reader, that if you're spending 2 minutes, a 2-minute interview with a guest who's written a book, you'll go read that book to make sure that you've got the background on that. I'm told you are just about the most prepared person in the industry when it comes to interviews. What goes into your preparation to make sure that you're ready for a Saturday night or for a broadcast?
Well, for sure, it's a ton of reading. And now you can do it online, right? There's just a difference. But I still love a book. What I'm reading right now is Newport Jane by Katie Bieksa. Kevin Bieksa's wife wrote an incredible, it's like a Harlequin romance. So I'm halfway through the book. She's brilliant. But I love to read. And that's, in a way, preparing for the playoffs with Kevin, right? I just get inside Katie's mind, and it'll help me with Kevin. So that's the kind of reading you do. It's not always directly nonfiction and related. It's more to understand, that kind of nuance. Wayne Heinrich taught me, I'll just, in case I forget, Don Whitman. I used to be spellbound watching Whitman. He and I would go for these long walks in, let's say, Seoul, Korea at the Olympics in 1988. And I thought, how in God's name is he so prepared? Because he's always out gambling or walking, but he was unbelievably prepared. So time management's a big part of it. And I was taught by a radio mentor in Red Deer, Wayne Heinrich. He used the radio pseudonym Wayne Barry, but he said 10 hours run to every 1 hour on air. And I don't necessarily adhere to it, but I understand what he meant. You can't be prepared enough, because especially, Sean, when I was young, I had a lot of anxiety issues. It really helped me. The triggers, I learned later that the big trigger was to get out of yourself, stop thinking about how you look. And that's the big one. But the other one is preparation. If you ever find yourself on air ill prepared, it doesn't take long for that panic attack to start.
Great subject. I know it's a tough one, but Ron, what do you think the way the league is sort of trying to take some steps on that front? I mean, some teams, you talk about Bieksa being right at the top of,
Right.
What do you think of, the people being more open with a subject that historically has been, kind of in the shadows?
Well, it's lovely, right? I mean, I didn't dare mention that I was having anxiety attacks. Back in the day, I was convinced I was the only person having one.
Yeah.
Kelly Rudy's been an incredible advocate. Obviously, the Rick Rippon Foundation that Kevin so greatly supports, and the Winnipeg Jets, they've always been on that front line with it. Miriam Taves, the writer, she's Steinbach, Manitoba, but she's basically a Winnipegger. And Miriam has written 2 books about both her father died of suicide, knelt in front of a train, and her sister knelt in front of a train and died of mental illness, which resulted in suicide. And she's the most incredible spokesperson on the topic. But yeah, I'm grateful that it's just an interesting time, right? I think, honestly, as I look at everything, now the Rangers will have to load up on tough guys to be ready for Tom Wilson, not to change the subject, but I feel there's a lot of trying to put the genie back in the bottle going on in our world, whether it's how we approach COVID-19 and who we listen to, whether it's politics, whether it's the sport dynamic. The genie that came out of the bottle was obviously a huge one with respect to diversity and inclusion and equity and mental health. So we're at a time of prolific change, not easy for everyone to understand. And there's Scott Oak, I should mention too, with the Bruce Oak Treatment Center opening. What an incredible amount of advocacy that the Oaks are doing. So yeah, it's a very rewarding and exciting time to actually be part of that. And that's why, back to your earlier question, Sean, hometown hockey, I thought, was going to be that. It was going to be the most important show. The show of record, the big show, will always be Saturday night. But I felt like if we could get into the community and share those stories, it would really be good.
There's like 5 different directions I want to go in based on what you just said there. I want to try and close one off, because when you say the anxiety that you felt, and that back then you felt like you were the only one doing it, I think I did my first Hockey Night in Canada game about 5 years ago, and I felt that exact same way, and thought, maybe the anxiety that I was feeling about it made me unfit for the industry. Right. And then I heard a really good interview on 31 Thoughts, not an interview, but a conversation. And Jeff Merrick was talking about his first time. Elliot Friedman was talking about their first time. And everything they were talking about was everything that I'd felt. And I think it's interesting that the first time I did mine, you and I had met in a San Jose hotel covering the Stanley Cup final.
Yeah, the gym.
And I was, at the gym. Yeah, so you remember this. And we were working out, and I'm getting set to go and do my first ever, this realization of a dream, right? And I'm getting set for it. And as I'm getting ready and I'm so nervous, you come to throw to me. And instead of just being one of these cold, here you go, it's you referred to me as your trainer. Yes. And talked about our time in the gym. And it just kind of woke me up a little bit and got me out of that. And just it totally set me up for success on my first time. And I wanted... You clearly understand the gravity that is involved with someone like Jeff Merrick or Elliot or myself doing our first hit on Hockey Night in Canada. I want to know your approach and kind of how you look at the responsibility of guiding people through what is probably one of the biggest moments of their lives.
Yeah, I do, because I also had that feeling, right, Sean? I was deer in headlights back in 1986. So you hope that, especially, in the case of Brendan Parker, just debuted a week and a half ago, and I couldn't find much dirt on him, right? Like normally I can find where they're from, or, and I had to ask him ahead of time. So I was just making small talk about, oh, you're from Saskatoon. And that's the first thing, is boil it down to just humanity. And then usually humor can be a good device, as you say, to get out of yourself, because that's where we all end up trapped, is we can't help but think, oh my God, I'm bumbling my words, or oh my God, I look foolish, or, I picked the wrong jacket to wear on this show. And whatever it is, it's so self-centered. And so, it's a bid for self-affirmation instead of a bid for self-acceptance. And I can't, teach you that. You have to live long enough to come to that point. But I want to try and at least blanket you a little bit, because I know, I have someone who's loved and someone who wants in my hands, in my care. So it is a responsibility. It's a privilege, as Cal Botterill would say. It's a real privilege to do that.
You sure would. How about the subject of mentorship, Ron? What role does that play? And I mean, obviously, when you're a national icon, you probably have a lot of people reaching out at a lot of times.
Yeah, well, Ken, it also continually reminds you of your own frailty and vulnerability, and your fear of getting it wrong. So I think mentorship, again, is just connection and especially hard conversation. Brené Brown, who's pretty expert on all this stuff, she likes to say that, your self-comfort, choosing that over a hard conversation is the epitome of privilege. And that word privilege is so offensive to a lot, but it's a very important word that just means, the status quo. All privilege is really saying is the way things were is very comfortable for someone. If you're a man, it's easier to walk out the door and not have to look over your shoulder. If you're a white man, it's a lot easier to walk out the door and not have to look over your shoulder, and so forth. And I think, the more lessons we get, I mean, I honestly, Ken, for the bulk of my life, thought that women and men thought entirely the same and lived the same experience. I thought that, and we've all been doing a lot of BIPOC diversity and inclusion education. Just never gave it a thought. I just woke up with my thought really being how to enjoy the day and which beer to pick and which hockey card to own, and such simple, no worries. You're kind of in a cocoon of comfort that now I've had my eyes opened, particularly with George Floyd and Black Lives Matter. But it's been a wave. Truth and Reconciliation. We're really lucky to have Senator Sinclair just up the road there in Peguis First Nation, write the Truth and Reconciliation Report. And before that, a guy from Yellowknife, George Erasmus, wrote the Royal Commission 20 years earlier. And so Idle No More was a wake-up call. Me Too is a wake-up call. Black Lives Matter is a wake-up call. And I think I'm just fascinated to be a part of this time.
On that subject, I loved your Sidney Poitier story that you told in association with the Black Girl Hockey Club, and how you had donated donated a chunk of your salary to the Black Girl Hockey Club to raise awareness, to take the Get Uncomfortable challenge. When I saw that, that's when I looked in that direction. That's what got me onto that. I was wondering, you're part of the hockey culture, and we've touched on this. We had Kevin Weeks on the show last week, and we talked about this. We had Harn Ryan on and talked about this. I'm interested in your view of using hockey as an agent of social change and how you go about doing that.
Well, the beauty is, and you just touched on it with Christine, is by representing, you can do it in a non-heavy-handed manner, and that's the joy. It's so difficult to rattle the chains of ownership. If you ask, like we in our fan inclusion committee meetings, and I'm not supposed to talk about this, but we talk a lot about telling them, we got to make the arena a safer environment, and that's not necessarily a problem at Winnipeg, but it's a problem in some centers where, a Black woman going into that crowd will feel very unsafe because it's just such a testosterone-filled and rattling environment. But the owner doesn't want to hear that. The owner wants whatever will sell that ticket to be the theme of the day. So I think you just represent. You bring all the different voices to the table, women, BIPOC voices. Let them be seen, and then it kind of takes care of itself. Again, that interaction, that conversation that's where. So when Shakespeare wrote about Hamlet, who ultimately dies of thinking too well, his great gift was also his nemesis, his ability to thought too much. But he and his valet, let's call him Falstaff, was a funny guy. But Prince Hal and he would talk, and just those conversations is where everything was revealed. It wasn't like a structured, sermon from on top, vertically given. It was a horizontal, two people just trying to sort out the day. And wow, just gem after gem of, and then in the case of Cervantes, it was Don Quixote and his, a peasant farmer named Sancho Panza, and Don Quixote, a retired school teacher, who's trying to be a knight and go around and save damsels in distress, kind of losing his mind. But the two of them start talking, and you got the street smart or savvy farmer, and you've got the longtime educator who's well read. Bingo. Those two come to, and that was the the beauty of Coach's Corner until it wasn't, until we got to a phase in this progression that we're in of trying to deal with a larger community. It was really tricky. And I hate to rehash it, but when you have a small community like we had, the hockey world, and then you have a larger community, and this is like COVID and doctors and everybody trying, and government officials trying to figure out, okay, well, but for the bigger audience, I can't think of your self-autonomy and your freedom right now, and I can't think of your business, I'm sorry to say. I have to think of this. Wow. What challenges those present?
Ron, your ability to connect the entire country is something that has always been so impressive, but what's it like also to have the responsibility to speak to the nation as a whole?
Well, again, you're like, I go into every weekend, just Carrie, my wife, she used to say, try not to be trending tonight. So, that's in the back of my mind is this, okay, get over yourself. If I would just shut up, Matt Galloway was on, he's the great host on CBC radio, and he has a little Post-it note on his microphone that says, stop talking. I sometimes think, Ken, if I would just do that, I'd be on Easy Street all the way down. But I'm curious, and the world doesn't reward curiosity. There's a great book by Ta-Nehisi Coates, Between the World and Me, and he's trying to teach his young black son what it's going to be like life. And that's what he says. I was a curious child. I wasn't interested in secondhand answers. And that's how I kind of am. But I also have seen, God, you look at my Wikipedia and it's more apologies than Socrates. I'm forever getting it wrong. Let's say, as an example, one of my big gaffes was two Quebec referees doing a Tampa-Montreal game. And I said, Montreal won't be happy with that. Well, okay, Ron, that maybe you can say that, in the ref room, and you can say that, but you're on national television, for heaven's sakes, when you just said that. And now it's going to get miscommunicated so quickly. Same with, I did another one of my screw ups. I was trying to compare, the Washington Capitals were playing the New York Rangers, and it was a decade after 9/11. But it was a shot blocking series. They were setting all kinds of crazy records. Dan Girardi was, the most shots blocked. And I was just saying it would be ridiculous to compare a hockey series to what the first responders did during 9/11. But the two cities are forever linked by that tragedy. And I know that everybody in the front lines of those jobs would respect the way these guys are playing the game. Sounded good in my mind. Didn't work on national television. And it certainly didn't work once it got to Twitter. So that's, Ken, the problem, right? Is, I'm a bit always pulling my punches for fear of the consequences of oh Lord, please don't let me be misunderstood. We all live that, right? We all live that responsibility, if that's the word. And yeah, Cal can tell me it's a privilege, and I do appreciate that. And I do believe compassion's the ultimate wisdom. So, if everybody could be forgiving of those missteps, it would be great. But we're not.
Ron, I'm fascinated by your recall ability, and it's one of the reasons why when I heard what they were doing with Hometown Hockey, heard you were going to be the host, I had thought he's the perfect guy for that. Do you know who Mary Lou Henner is?
No.
Mary Lou Henner's the redhead off Taxi. She's got an ability called hyperthymesia. What hyperthymesia means is that you can ask her, what did you do on June 24th, 1972? And she can tell you exactly what she did on that day. Yeah. It's like Patrick Laine. Remember, Patrick Laine can tell you every goal he scored. You can ask him about a goal in a game. He can tell you exactly what he did. I bring this up because I've had two experiences where I bumped into people, just fans that I met who knew that I worked with you and asked if I were, if we knew each other, and I talked about it. And both of them had the same story. They bumped into you somewhere and you'd met them. and they introduced themselves, and you chatted with them and spent time with them like you do with the folks when you go out and meet people at hometown hockey. And you'd met these two different gentlemen, and both of them had the same experience in that they met you at a later date. I don't know how long in each case. I don't know, it was 4 years, maybe it was 7 months, but you had met them both at a later date and remembered their names and remembered specific things about them. Just like when I went on for my first time on Hockey Night in Canada, you remembered that time in the gym and what was happening there. I'm not saying that you have hyperthymesia, but what's your ability when it comes to the recall of, just people that you meet here, the little details that really do make the difference and color things in your interactions with people?
Well, it's very hit and miss, Sean, for sure. Like I can watch a movie and forget that I've seen it. So I don't retain everything. I definitely prioritize somehow in my own, like all our minds are like that, right? We have certain things that seem important to us and we'll retain those. And it could be a name from an event or a beer or a setting. It could be anything that I will, like all of us. What I do know that I have is a good short-term memory. I can look at, you give me a page of script that's locked in for the next, 6 hours, and then it's gone. But a very good, it's easy for me to do an award show or, even hometown hockey is a bit of a bluff for me. And I really feel, I love the connection of Saturday night into Sunday because it gives you that sort of, you're walking away from the shared experience that we all had. Saturday night, 2 million viewers, we were together and we experienced it. So when I come into Thompson, Manitoba, they can, relate back to having seen me the night before. Unfortunately, when I arrive, I'm sleep deprived, which, as you know, is as bad as being drunk. And I thank God I have that gift that I can sort of look at the sheet and go and blurt it out at the meet and greet. I can have a list of, I don't know how many names of mayors and MLAs and such, and it'll be there for the hour that I need it, and then it's totally gone. So that's just a lucky thing that my mother had. My mom she could give you the inventory of, she worked at Pittsburgh Paint and Glass. She knew every glass dimension, every nail size. She had a good memory when she needed it.
Quick one too, just to pivot, Ron. Obviously, we know you were a high-level referee for a long time. How did you first get into it, and how did that help shape the way you talk about referees? Because we know that in all fan bases, the referee is out to get their team. So I wonder how those two things have kind of married, if you will.
Well, Ken, as I said to you, I was going to be a teacher, so that was my big goal. And Bernie Roth, a buddy of mine who's gone now from Red Deer, he kind of got me into both my vocations. He was the one who loved to listen to a guy named Eric Bishop do play-by-play of the Calgary Centennials. So whenever we were at Bernie's home, we would listen to the Centennials games, and that was John Davidson and net and Mike Rogers and Danny Gare, and before that, Brian Carlin. Anyway, and he first started as a part-timer at the local radio station, and when he was sick one day, said, "Phone Ron. He'll know how to do the button pushing. He'll take the $3 an hour." So he got me into that, and then he got me into refereeing. He was also the guy that started refereeing ahead of me. And I followed into that. There, Ken, I saw the opportunity to teach. And I saw the opportunity to take that, I don't know if high road is the right way to describe it, but as I've explained before, everyone else in the game is self-interested. The players are self-interested. The fans certainly are. Management, ownership. The one job in the mix that is not born of self-interest is the referee. And you could say, well, to a point. I mean, they want to curry favor with their supervisor to get a playoff game. There is a little bit of that. So nothing's clean. But in principle, the idea of why you referee is to create a level or a fair playing field, to maintain safety standards, to create flow, and all those great challenges that educators experience and judges and police officers experience. It was right there. And it informed me in that sense that, hopefully in my interviewing, I wouldn't be unfair. And like I said, it got complicated because sometimes it's just me and someone with a vested interest in a side. I'm consequently taking the other side of the argument, and it looks a little bit like, as Shirley Najak would say, I'm coming at it with a black heart as opposed to a genuine or kind red heart. But reffing taught me that. I loved, and there's a funny thing too. I refereed some very important games in my, whether it be the Dudley Hewitt Cup is our top junior A tournament in Ontario, or the Air Canada Cup, which is the top midget championship at the time, became the TELUS Cup, and I don't think it's called that anymore. But I would never have anxiety there. I could go into those pressure cookers, filled arenas, teams, with the, on tenterhooks, and I felt completely calm on the ice. Now, is that because I was moving? That's what I kind of thought. Maybe because my body is in motion and I'm having to dodge pucks, I don't have time to think about myself. I don't know. But I loved refereeing for its, the communication. Some guys do it with vinegar, but I did it with honey. I was always out there talking to the players and trying to work my way and manage my way through the night. Great challenge. And just when I thought I had it zest, the guy would say, "Oh, go screw yourself. Just make the call."
Ron, we don't want to take too much of your time, but I got to ask this before we let you go. Working with the CBC, I give the CBC a lot of credit for how it's kind of built up hockey over the years. And one of the things I thought is so interesting about the way that it's done, that it's pushed hockey, is kind of marrying it with the Canadian culture. Weaving it right into the fabric of our society. I'm interested in some of the conversations that you've had, or the mandate that you felt while you were at CBC and carry forward about doing that job of bringing those two things together, and what you feel your role remains in that regard.
Well, you're right. There's no question there was kind of a DNA that you accepted when you took the job at CBC, and it was whether it was Morningside, Peter Zosky's show, there was almost this feeling that, and mandate is a word that is now taboo. They don't want to use words like mandate, which sounds corporate speak. But the idea that CBC's only going to survive as long as it's a vehicle of unification, as long as it's a way to connect Inuit, Métis, First Nations, French, English, and so forth. As long as it's doing that job, it will have a job. So you had to do it. You had a reason behind it that was, I always say, okay, the CTVs of the world, they're at the, mercy of influence, which is the mighty dollar. But we were also at the influence of government was going to give us our next handout. And we had to be very careful that the board of directors was satisfied that we were doing the job, meeting the needs of that mandate, which, as I say, it became a bad word. It's a good training, though. I was a child of the Air Force, Sean. I was a child of, a single kid in the house. So I was kind of born to this need to bring us together, to have friends, to listen to the other and be considerate of the other. It was way more of that in my life, my Air Force upbringing and being an only child, I think, that made me see, because we lived in Yukon, British Columbia, Alberta, Nova Scotia, and I have been in Ontario for the longest time. And so nobody, you can't, an Albertan will say, I hate those BCers, they're all Lotus Landers. And the Lotus Landers will say, I hate those Albertans, they're all rednecks, and on and on and on. And you live with all of them and you realize couldn't be further from the truth. We're all, and this is back to my naivete, but we all ultimately are just human beings. And I wanted to make sure that, when I got in the job, like you do, I wanted to accentuate that. And CBC's born to that too, because of that mandate.
Ron, I get asked all the time what it's like to work with you, and I've got my line down to explain it, what it's like being able to experience being around you and talk with you. Every time I have a conversation with you, I walk away feeling like I've grown 10 inches. There's something about you that just seems to bring out the best in people, or at least have people want to strive for the best in themselves. It's a phenomenal quality, and I think you achieved that here today. I really appreciate you spending the time with us today.
What a nice thing. Yep. Thanks, Sean and Ken. Continued success to you too. We'll see you on the tube, Ken, and I'll be talking to you on the weekend, maybe.
We look forward to it, Ron. Yeah. Thank you.
See you, Ron. Another phenomenal one in the books. Any takeaways for you, Ken?
I'm just so good stuff. Made it through almost a whole show without having a microphone issue. Should have just clipped it right there, Sean. Should have just turned it off.
Show over, yeah.
Yeah, no editing on the old YouTube channel. No, it was great stuff. I mean, just such fantastic insight from both Chris and Ron. I mean, this has just been such a treat again. I think, yeah, it just, like I said, I'm not speechless, but it's just so much fun to have these conversations and to get that deep insight, and the backstories are so interesting. And I mean, just be able to touch on some subjects that people don't get to talk about. In our industry, you don't talk about yourself very much, which is okay, and that's probably a good thing. But there's so many great things that you can share with people, and yeah, it's just such a treat. I mean, how about yourself? I mean, you've known Ron longer than I have. I mean, I haven't had a lot of working experience with Ron, but he's such great individual, and he's done such great work, and same with Chris. I mean, I haven't really worked with her very much either.
I mean, I'll say this about both of them. They're people who, and I tried to touch on it at the end with Ron. They're people who elevate people. They're people who take the people around them and boost them up and make them better. And I mean, it's one of the things that I'm not kidding when I said that. And I bet you if you talk to Jeff Merrick, I bet you if you talk to Elliot Friedman, I bet you if you talk to anyone who's ever hosted a game, or, Jennifer Botterill, I'm sure it's the same deal. If you go on that program, Ron is really the best at putting you in a position to succeed. And it's just somehow his ability to kind of bring you down and calm you, because it's he talked about that anxiety that he felt at first. It was crippling. The first time that I would have gone on Hockey Night in Canada, I had to go and watch the show afterwards to see if my absolute trembling was showing, because I was trembling. But there's, I wanted to ask him that question about guiding people through that process, because it's a really, really scary moment in that moment. And there's something about him that just like touches you, that puts you in a position where you just, that goes away for just a little bit, and at least gives you an opportunity once he throws you and passes you that ball of, the national audience turning their eyes right directly on you for the first time. There's something about, he passes you that ball, but does it in a way where you're a little bit more focused on, what he just said to you than you are on what you're about to do and the significance of that. So I'm glad we were able to talk with him about that.
Yeah, and putting people at ease. I mean, that's something that you're always trying to do, right? And when you're interviewing people, and especially if they don't know you, I mean, you got to give them a reason to open up to them, right? I mean, that's the beauty of the interview portion of the job. And I mean, it's tough to do in a Zoom call. We've found that out in the last year and change, but just got to keep striving to do our best on those fronts. And hopefully the folks that are watching enjoyed it as much as we did.
Yeah, I hope so as well. And I hope the audience didn't feel I was ignoring them. There are times that we bring in, and I know a lot of the people who are here tune into our post-game shows, and we like to have a lot of fun with your comments and bring them in on the screen to try and trip both Ken and myself up. It's a little game Ken and I like to play with each other. We did notice sometimes in these interviews that bringing the comments on screen trips the guests up, which is not necessarily what we're trying to do. We're trying to get deep and deeper in these things, and we don't want to interrupt that. So we're not ignoring you. We appreciate your comments. It means a ton. It means a ton that everyone tuned in today, and we can't wait to see you next time. Next game coming up on Saturday as the Jets play the Ottawa Senators. You can come see us on Instagram, on my Instagram account 45 minutes before the game, and right here where you're watching us for our post-game show. 4 more of them before the playoffs come, so make sure you get your money's worth and come in there. And if you're on our YouTube page, make sure you click subscribe so you can tune into all our stuff, including these shows that we just absolutely love. We hope that you loved them too. Thanks for joining us.